At 2:46 p.m. on the 11th of March, 2011, the ground beneath the Pacific Ocean shifted. It had been shifting, in fact, for years, slowly, invisibly, inevitably. The Pacific Plate had been grinding westward and downward beneath the North American plate at a rate of roughly 8 centimeters a year, building up stress along a fault line that ran parallel to Japan's northeastern coastline. For centuries, that stress had been accumulating in silence. On the afternoon of the 11th of March, it was released all at once. The resulting earthquake had a magnitude of 9.0. It was at the time the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan, and the fourth most powerful ever recorded anywhere on Earth. The seabed, along a rupture zone approximately 500 kilometers long and 200 kilometers wide, lurched upward by as much as 7 meters in places. The seafloor displacement was so severe that it shifted the Earth's axis by an estimated 10 to 25 centimeters and shortened the length of a day by 1.8 microseconds. Japan's main island of Honshu moved eastward by approximately 2.4 meters. In the cities along the Sanriku coast, Sendai, Ishinomaki, Kezenuma, and dozens of smaller communities, the shaking lasted for approximately 6 minutes. 6 minutes is an extraordinarily long time for an earthquake to sustain itself at that magnitude. Buildings swayed, roads cracked, bridges buckled, power lines came down. And then, almost as if offering a brief and false reprieve, the shaking stopped. What came next was something else entirely. Japan is no stranger to tsunamis. The word itself is Japanese, meaning harbour wave, and the country's long coastline has been battered by the phenomenon many times throughout its history. The Japanese government had spent decades preparing for exactly this kind of event. Seawalls had been constructed along vulnerable stretches of coastline, some of them towering structures 10 meters tall, designed specifically to absorb or deflect the energy of incoming waves. Evacuation routes had been mapped and signposted. Drills were conducted regularly. Warning systems had been installed that could detect a tsunami and broadcast alerts within minutes. The warning came almost immediately. Just 3 minutes after the quake, the Japan Meteorological Agency had issued a major tsunami alert for the Pacific coast of Tohoku. Sirens sounded along the shoreline. Television broadcasts were interrupted with warnings, the presenters wearing hard hats as protection from falling masonry. People were told to move to high ground without delay. Many of them did. Residents of coastal communities had grown up with tsunami drills. They knew the routes, they knew the signs. They grabbed what they could and they moved. Others, however, did not move or did not move fast enough. Some chose to shelter in buildings rather than flee. Some, having lived through smaller tsunamis that had caused little damage, believed the seawalls would hold. Some had simply grown complacent over the years of uneventful drills. Some were elderly or disabled or caring for people who were. And some, in communities where the warning had not yet reached clearly, simply did not know what was coming. There were also those who turned back. Survivors have described reaching high ground, watching the water rise far below, and then unable to bear the uncertainty, descending again to search for a family member who had not appeared. Some found them. Others did not come back at all. It is perhaps the most human instinct imaginable, and in the context of that afternoon, one of the most devastating. The first waves arrived at the coast somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes after the earthquake, depending on the location. The sea walls held briefly. In some places, they held long enough. In others, the waves simply kept rising. Estimates of the maximum wave height vary by location, but along the Sanriku coast, they were extraordinary. At Miyako, in Iwate Prefecture, water reached a height of 40.5 meters above sea level, roughly the height of a 14-story building. At Onagawa, the waves were measured at up to 34 meters. At the coastal town of Rikuzen Takata, the waves swept several kilometers inland, erasing streets, homes, and neighborhoods that had stood for generations. The sea walls, structures that represented decades of investment and careful engineering, were, in many places, simply overwhelmed. They were not built to withstand waves of this size, because waves of this size had not been anticipated in their design. Some held long enough for residents above them to escape. Others failed outright. In some communities, the walls gave people just long enough to believe they were safe, a false reassurance that may, in some cases, have proved fatal. Footage of the tsunami captured by residents, security cameras, and helicopter crews shows water moving not as a wave in the conventional sense, but as an inexorable tide, a churning black mass of debris-laden water sweeping through streets, engulfing vehicles, tearing buildings from their foundations, and carrying everything it encountered inland. The images are both spectacular and deeply disturbing. Cars are tossed like leaves. Houses collapse in seconds. The water does not recede quickly. In some areas, it remains for hours. Among the most watched pieces of footage is a sequence filmed from an elevated position overlooking the town of Notori in Miyagi Prefecture. The camera is still. The streets below are empty. And then, the water comes. Quietly at first. A darkening of the fields at the edge of town. And then suddenly everywhere, consuming everything in the frame within minutes. It is the most quiet and methodical kind of devastation imaginable. A suffocating, inexorable tide of destruction. The official death toll from the earthquake and tsunami stands at 15,899 confirmed dead. A further 2,527 people remain officially listed as missing, a number that has barely changed in the years since, because in many cases there is simply nothing left to find. The vast majority of victims were killed not by the earthquake, but by the water that followed it. Many were elderly. In some of the hardest hit communities, more than half the victims were aged 65 or older. They were the least likely to be able to evacuate quickly and the most likely to have underestimated the danger. The disaster did not end with the water. Among the structures caught in the path of the tsunami was the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, operated by Tokyo Electric Power Company on the coast of Fukushima Prefecture. The plant had survived the earthquake itself without critical damage. It had been designed to withstand seismic activity and had performed as designed. It had also detected the tsunami warning and had begun emergency shutdown procedures. Backup diesel generators had been activated to keep the cooling systems running. And then the waves arrived. At heights far exceeding what the plant's designers had anticipated, seawater flooded the generator rooms, knocking out power to the cooling systems. Without cooling, the fuel rods in 3 of the plant's 6 reactors began to overheat. Over the following days, partial meltdowns occurred in all 3. Hydrogen gas accumulated and ignited, causing a series of explosions that damaged the reactor buildings and released radioactive material into the atmosphere and the sea. Around 154,000 residents of the surrounding area were evacuated. Some would not be permitted to return to their homes for years. Some have never returned. The cleanup of the Fukushima site remains ongoing to this day, with an estimated completion date sometime in the 2050s. The total economic cost of the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear disaster has been estimated at approximately $360 billion, making it the costliest natural disaster in recorded history. Japan rebuilt. It does so with a quiet, extraordinary efficiency. Communities that had been erased from the map were reconstructed, sometimes on higher ground, sometimes behind even larger seawalls, sometimes both. Building codes were revised. Studies were conducted and reports were published. Memorials were erected in town centers and on hillsides near the waterlines the waves had reached. One of those memorials is a tree. A single pine, the sole survivor of the 70,000 that had once lined the coast near Rikuzentakata, stripped of its bark by the force of the wave but left standing by some combination of luck and circumstance. The tree itself eventually died from saltwater damage, but it was preserved, treated, and reinstalled in its original location, a solitary white trunk standing at the edge of the water. A monument to what the sea had taken and what, somehow, remained. The 11th of March is now observed in Japan as a national day of remembrance. At 2:46 p.m. across the country, people pause. They bow their heads. They are quiet for a moment. Then, they carry on.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Likewise. Likewise.
Yes, welcome.